Hello, everybody. Guess what? It's that time again. It's time for TV Talk brought to you by the Ayn Rand Center UK. You have the usual suspects here, me, Jennifer Bouani, and Jacques Schumann. And we talk about, basically, we talk about shows that are critically acclaimed and or popular from an objectivist point of view. Sometimes we throw little comparisons with Atlas Shrugged in there just to see how far our culture has degraded. Today, we're going to talk about For All Mankind, the television show that I think is in its third season for Apple TV. The producer of the show and the creator of the show, I believe, is Ronald D. Moore. For any of you sci-fi fans out there, I think you might recognize him from Battlestar Galactica fame and sort of a Trekkie, I guess. It's been involved in the Star Trek-esque universe for quite a while. I'm not familiar
Outlander.
Outlander. I'm not so familiar with his stuff in those realms, but I do like what I see for the most part in For All Mankind. I think it's an interesting story. It's very complicated with lots of things to really talk about if we want to really talk about them. The second part of the show we're gonna devote to talking a little bit about the bomb that was dropped in all of our laps yesterday. Mine came from my agents and managers who sent this response. I don't think they knew how deeply involved I was with this project. Their response was, well, we don't want you really working with these people, the Daily Wire, but this might be interesting because we know how interested you are in this philosophy. That's when I found out that the Daily Wire was picking up Atlas Shrugged as a limited run TV series. Now, we have lots to talk about with respect to that, lots to talk about with respect to Daily Wire and the meeting that we did have with Daily Wire and Dallas Saunier, the producer, the acting producer for most of their creative content, which we will talk about as much as you would like us to, because there's some stuff there. And I don't know that we will do it, but we do have a scathing letter I sent to Dallas at some point telling him exactly what I thought the Daily Wire would do to the project of Atlas Shrugged. And I don't think I'm wrong. I'd like to take some bets on that. But before we get to that bit of ugliness, let's talk about For All Mankind. So the basic premise of For All Mankind is an interesting one. It's an alternate universe premise. It asks the question, what if? What if the United States lost the space race, or at least to the degree that they weren't the first to land on the moon? And what happens to history then? What do we do to make up for that loss? Becomes sort of the ongoing series of obstacles that happen during this show. There's a lot that this show does right. We'll talk, I think, a little bit about the characters. The show stars Joel Kinnaman. I hope I'm pronouncing these words right. The words are a little small for me to read. He's Edward Baldwin. He's one of the main characters. He's the leader of one of the missions to the moon. His partner, Michael Dorman, who plays Gordo, has a very interesting character arc in his own right. He's his partner who goes to the moon. Excuse me, I have to stop because my cat has come into the house, so you guys can take over.
Okay, and then so Michael Dorman stars as Gordo Stevens, and Ren Schmidt stars as Margot Madsen, who is she actually ends up being flight control, but she's female engineer who is struggling to make it at that time as a female. And it also stars Chantal Van Santen as Karen Baldwin,
the wife of Edward Baldwin.
The wife of Edward Baldwin, who I don't think it was on accident that she was named Karen. She definitely acts like a Karen in the beginning, but she does have a very interesting arc. Chris Marshall as Danielle Poole, or Danny Poole, who is one of the female pilots that they bring in to go to the moon, and a host of other characters. Probably one of my favorite characters for season 1 is the character who plays Molly Cobb, or the actor who plays Molly Cobb. And I'm looking here to see what Sonia Walger, if I'm saying her name correctly. But go ahead, Mark, back to you now that you've got your cat.
Sorry about that. Cody came in here, and everybody who knows me knows what a devil Cody is, and he has to be kept out of these spaces at all costs. Otherwise, he takes things over. Yeah, so there's an interesting cast of characters, and The universe is very interesting because it puts us in the interesting and unfamiliar phenomenon of being second in the world. And what does America do about that? Well, what they do about it is they rise to the occasion. That's what they do. Prompted, unfortunately, by grandiose politicians, of course, who press the envelope, who want these quotas to be met for the sake of appearing to be better than the Soviet Union in order to win hearts and minds. Remember, that's what the Cold War was about, winning over hearts and minds to America. This becomes a proxy war, in essence, instead of the wars that we engaged in. It's this war of PR that becomes the front and center piece of American propaganda against the Soviet Union. And they set the goals, essentially, which usually tend to be unreasonable, and the men and women on the ground fulfill them. It's great to see how dynamic and creative people are when they are pushed to their limits and have to come up with solutions. That's a beautiful thing to see. And it's also nice to see the alt universe that changes social perspective. So this show, in a big way, is about conservatism versus the forces of change. And oftentimes during the show, conservatism in the form of values, gender roles, job performance, generally perspectives about the opposite sex, are highlighted for being empty. And this is one aspect, I think, of the woke movement, which I think many of us even of the objective movement can agree with, that to the degree that wokeness wakes us up to social prejudices, to superficial analyses of people's behavior based on characteristics that are involuntary, it's good. To the extent that it wants to wipe out Western civilization and or make those characteristics the truly dominant characteristics of human life, it's bad. So in many ways,
to the extent that it builds up one tribe and cuts down another, or it builds up one type of human and cuts down another.
Right. And in this case, in semi-objectivist form, the women are built up because they're, of course, unrecognized and now have to be recognized based on the circumstances, but not really at the expense of men. In many of these shows really denigrate men in order to raise women. Rand never had to do that in her literature. Men and women were heroes based on their values. If you were denigrated at all in a book, it wasn't because you were a man or a woman, it was because of the ideas that motivated you. And there's some degree of, I think, of that animating this. Although I think one of the main differences, if we were to draw parallels between, say, a Rand piece of work and this piece of work, is that Rand is about self-directed human beings, right? The Atlas Shrugged is about the fundamental place of the mind in human life and in human thriving. This says something a little different, right? It's not so much about self-initiated action as reactivity, as a ball hitting another billiard ball, setting other billiard balls off. It's more of a force and phenomenon, which they refer to often in this show as forces of change. So it has less the concept of directed, motivated behavior towards a goal, and a sort of a second-hander's premise of let's beat the other guy because he's the other guy.
What I do like about it is that it does, the whole series is born out of competition. If it weren't for the Russians getting to the moon first, America would not have had that competitive drive to, well, we got to one up them. And I like that because as a result of that fierce competition, you then open up the playing field and you make way for some really, really high quality, skilled people to come into the doorway. So I did like that aspect of it.
Yes, indeed. And you'd think that would pay off for any leftist who happens to be watching it when they see competition spurring innovation and when they see competition creating the impossible. You'd think, wow, that's interesting. I wonder if that's so. and it indeed is so. And that is one of the things I like about it too. And something else. I mean, you think about how we were first in the space race essentially. We're the first to land on the moon. And then NASA did essentially nothing for the next 50 years. 50 or 60 years. They had the capacity to go to Mars. Robert Zubrin wrote a book about it called The Case for Mars. They had the capacity, even on that 1969 technology, to do that and just didn't. It's as if, well, we achieved our goal and it's done. And that competition for world dominance ended up being funneled into other things like wars and proxy wars in other nations, as opposed to a scientific battle to see who could be the first to achieve something, not break something down, but to achieve something. And I like that premise as well.
Yeah. Before there's I want to just get to a couple super chats to so you're being asked, Mark, both on the regular chat and super chat. Also, thank you, Marilyn and Kiana Pellegrino for $2. It says show Cody. Like every people want to see Cody. I'm just letting you know.
Cody was forcibly removed from my.
Yeah,
from my,
sorry about that, guys. Cody's out of this episode. Apologies. And Allie for $5. Actually, let me get to we will get to that. I'll read it. I like how Karen and Tracy mirror what their sons were in trouble for: leader/follower. Karen more of a leader, and Tracy is just trying to be nice. That's interesting. We can talk about that. And then Wyatt for $2. We're going to get to your question at the end, Wyatt, because he's asking about the Daily Wire and if we were bidding at the same time. But because I don't know how quickly the super chats disappear, and we seem to be getting a lot of chats. So,
and I also have a super chat from last time. Since our show was recorded, we couldn't answer this. This is from Cyrano Dianconia. I like that. I guess it's Canadian, $2.79. To me, was Miles Heiser open to objectivism? Miles played my son, Alex, in 13 Reasons Why. He was open and untriggered by the things that I said. I don't know whether that meant any of it sunk in or whether he agreed with it or not. He's just super diplomatic. So I like that about him. That's a smart way to be, actually, in Hollywood. Or you could be like me and just pop your mouth off. Justin, also for $1.99, will you review House of the Dragon, I guess, or White Lotus? Well, we'll take this under consideration. We'll confer in private and see whether or not we will review those.
Yeah, I had answered that because I was part of the chat last week when we streamed. But it's doubtful that we're going to do House of the Dragon, just because not all of us have seen all of Game of Thrones. I think you do need to see Game of Thrones to have a pretty good perspective, and that's a heavy lift. White Lotus might be something that we can look at, but we'll talk about that offline.
Yeah, and I'm hearing bad things about House of the Dragon, by the way. A lot of people are just saying,
here.
I'm done with the show. I'm getting out after 2 episodes.
Yeah,
I think you should give a show a little bit more time to warm up, but hey, c'est la vie.
Say la vie. So back to For All Mankind. Jennifer, what say you on this series?
Yeah, I really enjoyed this series. I thought it was fun. I kept thinking it felt like a Mad Men version of NASA, or like if NASA was it was similar, being in the 60s, having to deal with the women versus men issues. It was cool, and just the way people dress. But I also enjoyed something, the plot twists that they have. Like, you would, even from the very beginning, you've got Ed, and he's like all down on NASA, and they can't take risk. And then you've got the other guy that's running flight control, and he's like, but wait a minute, it brings meaning and hope. And it's like this really optimistic view of what's going on. And then they switch it on you, and you find out he's an ex-Nazi. You're like, wait, what? Wait, who's the good guy here? And they did that throughout. They kept switching things, surprising you. I also really enjoyed the moral dilemmas that they put you in, or put the characters in. Things like the wife, what's her name? I forgot her name. The Ed's wife, Karen. Like she gets in a situation where she has to try to decide, their son he's brain dead. And do you tell your husband on the moon who's by himself and has to find his way home? And that's not easy. And there's nothing he can do about it. And he's just got to sit up there. So at first she doesn't even want to tell him.
FYI, spoiler alert, by the way.
Yeah. It's like, well, and you don't know if the kid's going to live or die at this point. And you're kind of like, wait, well, what should she do? And what would you do? There were many moments like that. There was a switch of what you thought the women were going to be like. They came in with one kind of, one was pretty and beauty queen, and another one's kind of like butchy, and they switch it on you. And what you think they are. I don't want to give away too much. So I really enjoyed the show.
Give spoilers. We spoil here, so I think it's okay to talk about.
Yeah, the one that you think is totally the one that everybody thinks is like it has to be 100% gay because she comes in wearing pants in the 60s, smoking a cigarette. With a butch cut hair and no makeup on and a flat jacket.
And kind of flirting with one of the other girls too.
Yeah, exactly. And you find out, many episodes later that she's just got this wonderful, adorable husband. And the one that she's the queen is the gay one, right? So.
And she's laughing at the fact that they think they're gay. Yeah, I think really good writing surprises you in its turns, right? And this does this every episode. From the very beginning, it's surprising. It's leading you to anticipate one end and gives you another. And that other end isn't disappointing. It actually pushes you over the precipice and makes you want to see more, right? The whole opening sequence is the sequence we all know, and at least I saw live as a 4-year-old kid, the first landing on the moon. You fully expect that we're going to see Neil Armstrong kick off the ladder with his famous speech, one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind, and you discover it's a cosmonaut. That's a twist 15 minutes into the show that blows your mind. And of course, it sparks great controversy and depression and intensity within NASA to pick it up. And they've got the jerk off Nixon, the egotistical authoritarian who wants, he wants us to be, he can't be the guy on the watch that the Soviets beat. And so his diktats more or less propel NASA into making their own moon mission, which you are convinced is dead. You think these guys crash on the surface of the moon. Buzz Aldrin, for crying out loud. Neil Armstrong, the very guys that we knew touched on the moon, but the redone universe we're in, it's entirely possible that they died. Well, they did not, but they all did. And that first episode leaves you with them sort of teetering on the precipice on a bad landing, but nonetheless alive, nonetheless on the moon, taking second place. And there's tons of incidences like that with respect to the characters that Jennifer said, where you anticipate one thing to happen, or they build the suspense for this thing to happen, and they don't let you down. They pop the balloon and put you in another place, which I think is great.
Which I think it really reminds me two things. A lot of the Mad Men elements that Jennifer, you were talking about, I found to be sort of similar and parallel with the way that they talk about the news in this show, and the way that they have the president and they have clips from real things that the president says, and then they have very obvious things where it's an actor sounding like the president, right? And they actually do that throughout the entire series. They go through Nixon, they go through Reagan. I won't give away what they do in season 3 with the presidency. That it's a pretty wild thing, but it also reminds me of God, what's that show called? Man in the High Castle. It's the alternate universe of if the Nazis had won, right? What would the world be like if the Nazis had won? And I love this alternate history because we get to experience all the things that we know about as in history already, but then we also get to look at, well, shoot, what if it didn't end up that way? What if it actually ended up this way? It's a great hook for a series. It really is.
It also comes down on a very sort of, I want to say even-handedly in a sense. It shows the government as being a catalyst for lots of change, lots of social change, particularly social chains, in an attempt to overcome our second place position with the Soviets, right? They demand that a woman become an astronaut. This sets certain forces in motion that caused the passage of the ERA amendment, which of course didn't happen in real life. But that very passage is linked to some government corruption that causes a terrible accident and kills a dozen people.
And also the fact that they demand it be a woman, but it's got to be a cute, good-looking woman, just
right.
for the PR.
They demand that. Of course, NASA picks the one who's most qualified, which I think is great. So you do see the ugly side of politics, and it's ugly. You can't hear Richard Nixon talking to people and not think this man is ugly, but also one who you expect the writers to more or less lionize, who was the lion of the Senate, never became president of the United States. Ted Kennedy becomes the president of the United States after Nixon, and despite the fact that you think you're going to get a second Camelot, you don't quite get that. You get insights into a corrupt personality who's just a half a step probably better than Nixon, but not much more, who's mired in controversy himself and using NASA and some of the crazy things that are going on in the new colony on the moon to distract from his own sexual scandals on the ground.
Interestingly, I gotta say that out of all the presidents that they depict, out of all the real presidents that they depict, well, real people. So Nixon, Kennedy, who wasn't the president, but here they depict him as the president, and Reagan, I think that their most favorable portrayal of a president was Reagan before the next president comes in for season 3, which I thought was really interesting. I may have to go back and look at that because that shows up in season 2. But you don't see the corruption from Reagan's, all the audio and stuff from Reagan. He actually is he actually calls to speak to people and congratulate them on their trips on their successes and stuff. So but I think that's pretty interesting. That probably, I don't know if that was on purpose, because I know that Ronald Moore is not any kind of closet conservative or libertarian, but
how do you know this?
Just from Battlestar Galactica.
That's right.
From articles I've read, and we actually researched him. Jennifer and I researched him when we were looking at He's a great showrunner. When we were looking for showrunners for the strike, but yeah.
Of course, the left has changed quite a bit since he did Battlestar Galactica, and they have ingested a type of Kool-Aid that I think is really destructive and turning off a lot of liberals, and perhaps he's one of those who's not taking a right turn, because who wants to do that, but just taking a turn away from the politics as usual.
It could be much like Bill Maher seems to do to an extent.
Yeah, liberals with brains can't take this, nihilistic onslaught that's coming at us from the left. So, and they shouldn't. Nobody should. So, do you want to talk about anything else with respect to this show? I give it a thumbs up. I think it's worth watching. I think it's worth seeing all 3 seasons if you can. Because they leave you wanting to see those seasons. I'm dying to see what happens between Jamestown and the Russian settlement on the moon. It starts out badly with Ed and his Russian counterpart, and even the last time we see that Russian cosmonaut, the way he turns around and you see the reflection of Jamestown in his visor. It's a seed that I think is planted for us later on down the line for a conflict that's going to happen. That's another thing. If we're talking about good writing plants seeds early on that end up paying off. And sometimes those seeds are very subtle, as much as a cosmonaut looking around and you see the reflection of the Jamestown in his visor, and you can just feel the malevolent energy and feel that something dreadful is going to happen. Even if it doesn't, your anticipation for that to happen draws you to the next episode. It's a mystery that you got to get to the bottom of. and they tease you. That confirming my conviction that really good writers are sadists. They're sadists, they're masochists. They like teasing you. It's like being tied up and tickled with feathers. That's what
It's,
they
you know,
like.
it's funny because it wasn't until I really well, I've been writing for quite some time, but it wasn't when Jennifer and I partnered up so many number of years ago. I never took as much joy in killing characters as I do with screenwriting. Like, oh, this character has to die. I love this character so much, and they have to die. That's like the only, and the decisions. I'm not gonna spoil it for everybody, but there are a couple deaths that happen in season 2 of For All Mankind where you're like, oh my heart, like who, like nobody. And I read about the in the writer's room the decision that they had to make and why it was the right decision to make it, and it was heartbreaking. They were all in tears.
Are these characters that have been established already in one?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, now I got to think about this. I want to throw a couple names out there and see if I'm right. And well, also you got to remember that behind each decision to kill somebody is an actual actor who's going to get the news, who's going to get that call from the, if they're honorable, he's going to get a call from them, and or a producer will come to him personally and say, we have to kill you. Just letting you know, we love you very
Unless
much.
you're on a soap opera, then you can come back as a ghost or a twin or something.
or supernatural, in which case you die multiple times and come back. But that's great.
Yeah. So I do want to get to, you can think about that, Mark, but I do want to make sure that we answer Allie's super chat question. I'll read it again. I like how Karen and Tracy mirror what their sons were in trouble for, leader versus follower. Karen more of the leader and Tracy is just trying to be nice. What do you guys think of that? Do you guys think that they fit into
Tracy's not just trying to be nice. Tracy's a hard ass astronaut. Karen is the one who's trying to be nice, and her son was the one who's rebelling more than the other one. And I think that comes out later on. And,
I think what's interesting
another dynamic that Tracy's working, so she's less involved with what's going on with her son. She doesn't know enough in order to be the leader and disciplining them. So she's kind of relying on Karen to know what's going on. Karen's watching them.
And Karen also thinks that that Tracy's son is the one that's influencing her son negatively, but it turns out to be the opposite, which is kind of an interesting inverse between Tracy and Karen, because remember, Karen is so, I don't think we were talking about this last night. I don't think that Karen is just jealous of Tracy being an astronaut. I think she's also very protective of her husband, and she feels like this is a publicity stunt, that Tracy becoming an astronaut is more a publicity stunt to, to get PR, but that rightfully her husband has put in all the work. I mean, you fought in Korea. He's put in all the work to be an astronaut all these years, and now he has to take a back seat to going to the moon effectively.
And it's great when all the characters in a show like that are right, because Karen isn't wrong. She's actually right about that. It is a publicity stunt. It just happens to be so that these women are eminently qualified and were overlooked and do deserve to be where they are. So both are right in a sense, and that's pretty awesome. Look, I mean, it highlights little dynamics like what it's like for women to, the traditional woman and the career woman to have to raise a child without another parent there, how difficult it is, especially with boys. That's a real sociological phenomenon. Boys without dads in the home can become sort of nuts. I know, I was one. And so are those two kids. One of whom feels rejected by his parents because they have abandoned him for their careers. That's a whole other type of psychological damage. And the other one whose father is gone, and the mother's an extremely strict conservative woman she's one of these types who says, do it because I say so. She doesn't try to reason with the child. I love the juxtaposition of cultures that happens when their kids get in trouble, and Karen is forced to sit in front of the counselor at school, and he's actually saying things that are legitimate, legitimate concerns that come from a more sophisticated point of view about children, as opposed to children should be seen and not heard, which is sort of the area Karen comes from, which unfortunately so many of us grew up with in the 60s and the 70s. I mean, when I watch Mad Men, I have PTSD watching the way Draper's wife treated her children. I mean, she was just awful, but that's like what we grew up with. We grew up with almost a contemptuous disregard for our lives. Yeah. And we were pushed out into the fucking world, whether we liked it or not.
Don't come home until dark. Don't get yourself killed.
Yeah. Just come back at X time. We'll worry about everything else later. I remember getting my nose broken in a fight, and nobody cared. And blood streaming down my nose. Like, you're fine. Go home, you'll be all right.
Walk it off.
So walk it off. Now people look back on those days and say, well, it made more resilient people. And you might see, the beginnings of something more helicopterish in the way in which that counselor talks about the children. But it's also meant to show, in my view, the different cultures that are now starting to have to not only just accommodate each other, but in a battle for supremacy as well. Right. It's not just the Russians and the Americans that are battling for supremacy. It's the forces of change and the social dynamic and the hierarchy of what we consider, who we consider heroic, that's changing as well. And that changes roles, father, mother roles, who stays home, who brings home the bacon, all of this stuff changes in dynamic ways. I think those things were happening in the United States anyway. Since World War II and even a little before, but it becomes accelerated, I think, in this alternate universe, and it's an interesting dynamic to watch.
Absolutely. Yeah, so we very much highly recommend it. One last super chat from Anthony Moynihan, if I'm saying that correctly. A comment, Battlestar Galactica was a fantastic show. Anthony, are you talking about the OG, BSG? Oh, and another question from Anthony as well. I'm assuming you're talking about the reboot. Both of them were good. I really did like the reboot, except for the very last episode of BSG, which in my opinion was okay. So, and then Anthony's asking for $5.99 pounds. It looks like off topic. Any views on The Peripheral on Amazon? In my view, it's right up with the best sci-fi. I will answer. I don't know, Mark or Jennifer, if you guys have seen it, but it was really funny because I started watching The Peripheral and I'm like, hey, I think I've read this book. And it turned out that I'd completely forgotten that I'd read the book. It's a book by William Gibson. And it's really interesting. It's great. The actress who plays Flynn, the major character, is pretty amazing. And it also has, it's an alternate reality as well as kind of futuristic parallel universe. So it takes place in 2039 as well as 2090 or maybe later than that. But it is really good. That's also another show that we can speak about amongst ourselves to see if we want to cover that show. But I think, Mark, you had because I know we want to get into talking about the strike and Atlas Shrugged and the news, but do we have an announcement on the next show that we're going to do?
Do we? Oh yes. Did we talk? Are we going to do Enola Holmes?
I think so. I mean, that was
okay. Good. Yeah. So Enola Holmes is not a series, but it is 2 movies. Enola Holmes 1 and Enola Holmes 2 on Netflix. You should check it out. Again, it's taking the good aspects of woke and making women heroes in non-traditional ways, which I think is fantastic. It's based on a series of books which I haven't read, but the series itself is fantastic. fantastic. It's funny, stylized. The acting is great. The mysteries are fantastic. The action is good. It's funny. The main actress, who was who played 11 in Stranger Things, breaks the fourth wall all the time, which I think is
interesting.
Which I think is a very funny potential device that brings you into it doesn't take you out of the scene, it brings you into the scene in a much more dynamic way. So check it out. Everybody's very good in it. It's very exciting, very funny, and it'll bring a tear to your eye. It'll make you happy with the heroism that you're seeing, because it is, after all, Sherlock Holmes's sister, and Sherlock Holmes is a pretty cool dude. He's a cool dude in this. His brother Mycroft is, of course, a sketchy character, very much about the conservative hard line and holding the hard line and keeping women in their place. And of course, that doesn't go well with Enola Holmes, and you will discover why it doesn't go well with her. Her mother is played by Helena Bonham Carter. She's a very independent woman. Yeah, and Sherlock himself is, of course, a very interesting character too, who's in the vein, I think, has great sympathy for and love for his sister, as you will find through the series.
And this is on Netflix, did you say?
Netflix, yes. 2 movies, about 2 hours apiece. So it's 4 hours of your time, but it's 4 hours that'll make you feel really good about living, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, awesome. I just, so Allie is saying that she really wanted to talk more about For All Mankind. She's got more super chats that she wants.
She can tell her to pop some up here, and we'll talk about it.
Yeah, throw some in there. I want to ask our producer Daniel what we're looking like for time, because I'm okay with running over an hour if we wanted to talk more about For All Mankind, but then talk more about the strike.
We have time, but I don't think we'll have to really go over, but we have time.
Okay. All right, Allie. So it's on you to throw up some super chats on For All Mankind. But let me ask in the meantime, Jennifer, speak more about what you like. What was your favorite scene or episode in season 1
of For All Mankind?
Mm-hmm.
My favorite scene
or episode.
Just so you know that whenever I'm asked this question in a Q&A about Supernatural, I can almost never answer
it. Yeah, like, how do I narrow it down? I know what I didn't like episode 3. So I know that's not the opposite of your question. I thought it was a little too on the nose. Woke women are great, men suck.
Well, so summarize, I guess, what happens in that episode.
Well, that was the one where Nixon's like, "Oh, you got to have you've got to compete with the Russians who put a woman on the moon. So we have and make sure she's pretty." So all the NASA men were like, "No, this is ridiculous. This is a publicity stunt." And they bring in these women who have pilot license and lots of experience, and they go through this lots of training, and they bond. And so it's good. And then you end up loving the characters as it goes on. But that particular episode just was over the top. I think Tracy's ascension was the least believable to me. But that wasn't the question. The question was, what was my favorite? I just really am drawn to the moral dilemmas. I love, especially one that I'd be like, ooh, make me think, like, what would I do? And I don't know if I have the answer to that. There was another one. I mentioned one, which was Ed's wife and having to choose with her son. But there's the one where is it Danielle, where you've got the guy going crazy on the moon. Gordo, I believe.
Yeah, with the ants.
And he's like ants everywhere, which was good. Like, they're all watching the Bob Newhart show and quoting, and he's getting up in the middle of the night and putting on a play, and they don't the other two astronauts don't perform well enough. So he's like, forget it, I'll just do every part. He's literally just going nuts. And then at the end of that, they're like, well, if we tell NASA you're going to ruin your career, you'll never make it back up here. And Danielle, unusually, in the middle of the night, decides to have an accident where her arm is broken and they all have to go home, which saves Gordo from having to lose his career. But it's like, it was one of those situations.
But it also makes
like,
her kind of a pariah.
It ruins her reputation, which is a great,
community.
which I think is a great question for objectivists. Would you do something like that? So she saves Gordo from not only humiliation, but losing his pilot's license and getting kicked out of NASA, kicked out of military, and leaving in humiliation. But at the price of her own reputation, right? Because everybody thinks, look, the woman screwed up on the moon. The woman couldn't handle it. Even though she's the true hero, Gordo gets all the heroic accolades. And to Gordo's credit, he has a save the cat moment where he wants to come clean. He wants to tell everybody that she's the real hero, not him. He freaked out. She refuses to let him. Would you do that? Do you think that was a moral move on her part, or was that a big sacrifice? I say it's a sacrifice, and I don't think I would have let Gordo off the hook. And I'm not sure that she's better than me for doing that. But, this is the world in which we live.
I still don't think, we talked about this yesterday, I still don't think that this was a sacrifice for her. I think that this was actually a self-interested move on her part, because as I recall, her appeal to Gordo for not revealing the truth wasn't just about protecting him. It was also about continuing to protect her, because if he came clean with the truth and it was revealed that she willingly broke her arm and effectively endangered the mission, because now Ed's up there all by himself.
But that's moot.
But she would be kicked out of NASA.
Yeah, but it's moot. It's the fact that she did it and put her in that precarious position. If she didn't do it in the first place because she didn't feel any moral obligation to do it, despite how bad it was for Gordo.
So you're saying that they're breaking her arm?
The act of doing it, right?
Okay, I thought you were talking about.
She put herself in great danger. She put not only her life in great danger immediately, because she's on the fucking moon with if you look at the arm, it's badly broken. That's a serious problem. In order to save a guy who frankly hasn't built up the love from me as an audience member. He's an unfaithful guy. He's charming. He's sweet in a lot of ways, but he fucks around on his wife, and he's going out of his mind. And there's a lot about him that doesn't make you necessarily want to root for him. So I didn't think it was earned. And it's that unearned thing that I don't care if the rest of society is like, oh my God, she's great for doing it. No, she's not. She did a stupid thing, and I don't know what effects it's going to have on her career. Maybe the karmic wheel will turn in her direction in a good way, but it wasn't something that I would have done.
There is fallout from it, because she does sort of become, in the astronaut community, like sort of secretly a bit of a pariah. Like when they go back up to Jamestown in season 2, Jamestown is, all built out a lot better than it's a much bigger location now, and there's a picture of her on the wall with her broken arm, like, don't let this, and it says, don't let this be you. So she has to deal now with that stigma of being the astronaut that couldn't help herself from breaking her arm, and as the first female astronaut as well. Right, to do that. It was a female that did it.
That's bizarre to me. Like, in what world would your coworkers put your poster up and say, "Oh, how dare you break your arm"? Accidents happen. That's very weird. It's almost bullying.
Yeah, as they say,
kind of what men have been like in some cases, though. I got to say, when women have taken their jobs in that mentality. I'm not saying that it's rational in any way whatsoever, but that is, oh, well, look, leave it to a woman to be the first astronaut in space to break her arm. Right. And it's mostly men that are doing that.
Cobb sees, you see Cobb's evolution through the course of the first season, from somebody who's a sort of cynical, tough, hard ass to somebody who realizes that this isn't just about her, it's about her image, and it's about women, and it's about how they're perceived now, and so that her stature is so much more increased because she's fighting a battle for womankind in a sense, and you see it dawn on her in a couple of moments where she begins to see that she's more than an astronaut. She's a politician. She's a diplomat. She is somebody standing at the forefront of a movement, and she needs to represent, right? So a woman who breaks her arm like that it's more than a woman who broke her arm for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they make it a social a social issue. You know, a proof that women are not capable of going up there and being in space. So each woman is standing for quite a bit more than just being herself in a job like anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
So if Allie doesn't have any of those questions,
she does. She's put in a bunch more questions. So let me go back to and Mary Aline, thank you for the $1.99. Allie for $5. Thoughts on the fake marriage to save face of being an astronaut? Pam deserves so much better than that. I think Pam's ultimatum was right. So my thoughts on it are that did that happen in season 1 already?
Yeah.
Okay, you guys got that. And so I mean, I can't say it was the right thing to do, but I completely understand why they had to do it, given the times, given the social circumstance at the time. I mean, this is where there were no gays in the military. Everybody was, if you were gay, you were completely closeted, unless you had a job where you didn't need to be closeted. But even then. Yeah.
I mean, even then, you know, there were laws of the United States of America, anti-sodomy laws, and there were attempts on the federal government's part and in the policing apparatus of the federal government at times to raid gay homes, to raid businesses that were gay, and to arrest people for the fact that they were gay. I mean, we lived in fairly dark times in the 60s. Those were dark, scary times for people who were gay. So I think it was the right thing to do. What good is it going to do for them to sacrifice themselves on the swords of their own personal truth? It won't do anything. They'll just be martyrs and they won't succeed. It fucking sucks. It's a horrible thing that they had to do. And anybody with a conscience can feel for that and even look back in history and say, my God, these people had to experience this kind of ostracism and this constant threat to their lives for just being who they were. Thank God we've come beyond that, because it was a horrible thing to have to witness these people not being able to love who they wanted to love. So yes, she did the right thing, of course. The man did the right thing as well. And it's unfortunate.
And Pam was right in her ultimatum, because Pam, wanted to, for her own personal self, she couldn't live closeted. I mean, it's like being a mistress, you just why do that? Why, you should be proud of your relationship and you should be able to show it in front of people. And so they were right in their decisions, I think. But it turned out that it didn't make them all happy.
Again, to make a distinction with some of Rand's writing, I think good writing is like this. It's like where all the parties involved have a stake in the right. You could actually see their perspectives as being right, even though you may not like the choices of where they go. Everybody's doing the right thing for themselves. Rand is more, makes different points about right and wrong, and people who are villains are clearly villains, and people who are heroes are clearly heroes. And there's none of that, well, you could do the right thing you could do the wrong thing, but for the right reasons type of phenomenon. Even though I also think she would say, if you're in a college classroom and a professor calls and you disagree with his point entirely, you might not necessarily say that, at risk of losing your grade. And you always have to look at the long-term benefits of anything you do. And they were all looking at the long-term benefits of their actions, and they all made the right decisions in that case.
I agree. All right, Anthony Moynihan for £5.99. The Don't Be Cruel dancing scene with Karen was the best. It's a great version of the song. You guys haven't seen season 2, but that song comes back to haunt you like a bloody, horrible vengeance in season 2. With the decision that Karen makes, that, and my daughter and I have been watching it together, that both of us are like, bleh, bleh.
Karen makes a bad decision.
Oh yeah. Oh hell yeah. Yeah.
Not surprising. Not surprising.
I'm not going to spoil it for you guys for YouTube. I'm sure that the people on the chat who have seen all
Is
three.
Is she going to have an affair? No. Tell me if I'm hinting and if it's going.
Yes, you're hinting in the right direction. It's just
what an idiot! I knew she was going to do that. It's such a typical way to.
When you see it, I know you will text. I know you will text us when you see it. The second
Tracy had more of a reason to have an affair than Karen does. Karen's doing it out of, I imagine, just being a completely frustrated homebody and who needs more and doesn't know how to get more.
Well, it'll be very interesting for you guys to watch season 2.
Plus Ed's a little bit of a hard ass though. He's a little bit of a hard ass. He's got a cold edge to him. I wouldn't want to live with him.
No, and I love Joel Kinnaman. Like, I have dibs on him. And I loved him in Hannah as the father in Hannah. He was amazing.
Wait, the TV series or the
the TV series. Just watch season 1 of Hannah. See the rest of the season.
I didn't realize that was the same actor.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And he was also,
that tells you how good he is.
Yes.
Wow.
Because Joel Kinnaman is Dutch or something like that. And so he does his accent, like his accents are really good. But
yeah, but Ed, you could stick a piece of coal up that orifice of his, and in about 10 minutes, it's going to come out a diamond. Any more questions from Allie, or should we move on to our
just a comment from Allie for $5 again. Thanks, Allie. Alita Rosales is an interesting character. Her dad sacrificed his quote unquote stay in the US to protect her. Yes, and it's not a sacrifice though. I think what Alita's father did was not a sacrifice, because he gave up Alita was his higher value. And it's people keep talking about what kind of sacrifice parents make, and we don't make sacrifices because we love our children. We do things of course we're going to go hungry for them, because we had them and we value them more than, we value whatever our immediate need is at the time. It is a show of your higher value.
That's right. And that's where objectivists are very countercultural. They don't see going for your higher value and delaying gratification, as the typical folks would say, or putting off current pleasure for later pleasure. They don't see that as a sacrifice at all. Working for your values is always a good, and that's what that man does. So the girl breaking her arm for Gordo, I don't know where that's going to, that's a sacrifice. She put herself in great jeopardy for a guy that, has a questionable meaning to her. I don't like that. And I don't know where that's going to go, or if it's going to pay off in her favor later on. But that man's going, first of all, becoming an illegal immigrant, hopping over the border. I hate to say this, it's going to make a lot of people mad at me. I am for free immigration. I'm for people moving across borders. You have a natural right to improve your condition, to move from one place to another. That's a natural right, which we don't ignore now with these nations, nation states who claim to be able to. I mean, you don't have a natural right to infect people if you have an infectious disease, or to abuse people if you're a criminal. You stay out. But if you want to work, you want to be productive, you should be able to go across the border and work and be productive in a way that your country doesn't allow you to do. But that's a controversial position today. But so when they came over the border, they were looking for a better life, and they meant it. They worked for it. And he is working for his daughter to have a better life than he could have in Mexico. And that is heroic. that man, that janitor, the janitor at JPL is a hero. And he's a Rand hero as far as I'm concerned.
Yep. I agree. I could go on by talking about Elian Gonzalez, but that topic always gets me really, really pissed off. But we are closing in on time, and Mary Aline for $2 says Atlas plus open immigration. So I guess it's time for us to talk about this Daily Wire thing, eh?
Okay, so as many of you know, how was it? Was it 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago? It was right around the COVID phenomenon, right? That this all happened. All right. Tal turned me on to these amazing ladies and said, you got to, meet these folks. They might have something that interests you. Of course, I thought that was probably BS. Lots of people want to meet me and give me things to read, and it's usually crap. So I usually don't read the things that people give me. Well, I made the mistake of reading this because it was actually very good. And we talked about it. They developed it a little more after the stuff we talked about it. And I thought the final product of their pilot was one of the top 10 pilots I've ever read. And I've read the best pilots in the freaking world. So not to make you guys feel embarrassed, but I loved the pilot. I was an enthusiastic supporter of this. And so we started on the road to trying to find representation and somebody to produce this damn thing. Of course, one of the first people I would write letters and send packets to producers. That was sort of my thing for about the first almost year. And some of the packets never arrived where they were going because those production companies moved or closed down. So I would get it back in the mail and it would be gone. Some went through. One of our first ones went through to one of the biggest producers in Hollywood, produces one of the biggest shows. I won't say this person's name, but their response was, I think, typical for the industry, which was this. We actually made, as they said, Mark, we love you. We really appreciate your work. We have made a documentary that paints Ayn Rand as one of the most harmful things to come to Western civilization in its entire history. We think it would be disingenuous for us to pick up this project and work with it with our feelings the way they are. So we knew going into this that Hollywood's hostile to Ayn Rand, and
not only that, at the same time that Mark was sending his stuff out, Jennifer and I got a literary manager who read our script and our show Bible. And despite her not being an objectivist at all and not really even knowing about very much about Atlas Shrugged, she actually had to ask her son about it. And her son was like, oh my God, it's one of the most controversial books ever. But she fell in love with our script and our show Bible and sent it out. I probably to like 50 different production companies, and the feedback that we would get mostly was amazing script, probably one of the best show Bibles we've ever seen, but it's not on our cultural agenda to develop this.
Okay, so this is the primary response we get. Great script, great show Bible, great story, but it's not on our agenda to do it. Now, you have to understand that these guys reimagined Atlas Shrugged, not the philosophy, but the world. And it was a world that was, I hate to use a word that everybody uses now because I want to wipe my butt with it. It's so overused. Inclusive. It was interesting. The characters were not the ones that you see in Atlas Shrugged. They were identifiable. They were interesting.
Well, they're more representational of what we have in the world.
I mean, I hate to say that because it has it's such a loaded term in Hollywood. Yeah. But I felt that look, one of the things we talked about with respect to For All Mankind is, as stupid as it may be, as much of its objectivists say, it's not about, appearances. It's not about, gender or race or any of that. It's really about your character. There is something to seeing someone like you achieving something, right? It does something to you. It fuels you in a way that watching somebody else do something great, even though it fuels you, might not. it does give you a sense that if that person could do it and they're like me, it's possible for me. As silly as it sounds, it's a fact. And so this script was populated with very interesting characters, and it had humor in it, which I think was in such low doses in the original novel that they were imperceptible, and that's
I want to
good.
say we didn't deviate from the characters that Ayn Rand wrote as far as their philosophy goes and their view of life and their choices that they're making. That we kept because it was critical for the philosophy.
All of that was, but you know what? The fucking teaser and the introduction of Dagny Taggart, the teaser just blew my mind. It made me turn the fucking page. I had to see what was going to happen next. And when I see Dagny for the first time, I'm getting chills right now just talking about it. I freaking saw a rock star. It was like a rock star, and it wasn't trying to be a rock star. She was just a fucking rock star. So, I mean, it was like any woman seeing this person, Dagny, would want to be her. And it goes straight down the line with every single character in there, every single heroic character. I want to be that guy. I want to be that girl. That's what I felt. So anyway, before we sent out all this stuff, we made the pitch to John Aguilera, who liked it. His wife liked it. They gave us
drove down to Vegas. He drove his ass to Vegas, where we met him for the first time. We all went to dinner with John and Joan, and we brought our script and show Bible with us to give to them because we've been put in touch with him. And also because John Aguilera owns the sort of the remake right to the movies effectively, and it was a great dinner. I mean, we all had a great time.
It was an intense dinner. It was great. We plowed our will down his throat, and he gave us the shopping rights for like $1.50 for a year.
$1.25.
$1.25 for a year. And in that year, as Jax was saying, her representation sent it to 50 people. I sent it to at least 20, 25 people. We conferred, we talked, we tried to generate interest in it. Nothing was happening.
John did always say, like, just let me know if anything. Well, he would tell us like that he would let us know if anything changed in terms of the shopping option. And I still feel like John, respects what we did and appreciates what we did. So it did come as a bit of a surprise to learn that the option's now been sold to Daily Wire. But then, Mark, you can talk about our conversation with Daily Wire if you want.
Yeah, so we had a conversation with Dallas Saunier of the Daily Wire about a year and a half, 2 years ago. I was in Pittsburgh when this happened. He read our script, liked it, but it's hard to tell. He's a nice guy and he's a producer. So, a lot of times they don't tell you exactly what's going on in their minds. I'd say most of the time they don't. Most people aren't honest in Hollywood, unfortunately. So he was very pleasant guy to talk to, but he was persistently sticking to a traditionalist line. His perspective was basically to copy the novel and make that into a limited series. Now I said this in much stronger terms in a letter that Jax read to me last night again, which I still stick by. It was an extremely intense letter to him after our meeting. I said that was a mistake. I said that this project has been in the works for upwards of 60 freaking years. It's been going for a long time. Rand couldn't do it. Peikoff couldn't do it. We know John couldn't do it. When he did actually produce the 3 movies, they were probably the worst cinematic flops in history, and they were awful. I read sides from one of the movies, and it was so bad I wanted to shoot myself in the head. So it hasn't been done. It hasn't been done for a reason. And the reasons, I think, were solved by these 2 folks here. It's because it's too goddamn didactic, and nobody wants to be preached at. You want your philosophy to hit you through osmosis. You want a story first with a great narrative and great characters, and the philosophy hits you by osmosis. It's not talked at you. It's not rammed down your throat. There's nobody proselytizing in it. It's their actions. It's the things they do that make it happen predominantly. And so he was still bent, no matter how much I tried to tell him that that was a mistake, on this traditionalist point of view. So after hanging up with him, I wrote him an extremely strong letter suggesting that not only was it a mistake, but he's falling into the trap that has made this an untouchable project for the last 50 years, made it impossible to produce. That he's not going to reach the wider audience that I think our script will reach. They've got a subscription audience of 1 million people, folks. That's it. And it's a captured audience, but that's all there is. We want this to reach 16, 17, 18 million people, millennials, Gen Zers, who are going to see this and respond to it in a way that they never could before reading her books. And that was a distinct possibility until Dallas.
As a comparison, like what were the numbers I gave last night? Disney Plus has
163 million. 163
million subscribers. So Jennifer and I actually had heavily considered, well, would we really want to work with the Daily Wire? And one of our reasons we certainly talked to Dallas. We were open to everything. But you can correct me if I'm misspeaking for us, Jennifer, but we didn't want this to be behind a paywall. We didn't want this to be represented by conservatives or by liberals, because it's Atlas Shrugged. It flies in the face of both. And that's what needed to represent this piece of work.
Oh yeah, I forgot to say this. When we went into this meeting, we all agreed that we did not want to go to the Daily Wire. We all said, we don't want this, but we want to win the meeting. So the only reason we actually had the meeting with Dallas in the first place, and if he's listening, good, I want him to hear this. We didn't care if they said yes or no. What we wanted them was to say yes, so we could say no. But for me, I just wanted to practice at pitching. I had no intention of actually going to the Daily Wire. Their audience is too small. They don't understand objectivism. In fact, their ethics are reviled by pretty much everybody there. So I don't know how they're going to deal with capitalism without, also dealing with the attendant ethics that go along with it. They can't. Is that
your Ben Shapiro voice?
Yeah, that was Ben.
That's pretty good, Ben.
Thank you.
Capitalism.
I don't see how they're going to deal with capitalism without dealing with the ethics, because Rand was original in linking the two together. And the Republicans don't like that. It makes them very uncomfortable. They don't know how to deal with it. So I foresee a big fat frickin' flop. Now I could be wrong, but I haven't been so far with respect to these folks. So the main thing that pisses me off personally was that I felt that we had a 2-year relationship with John. John owed us an explanation. Whenever they're gonna kill you off in a film or a TV show, they feel it is a ethical priority for them to sit you down and tell you what they're going to do, and then why they're going to do it and how much they appreciate you, because they understand that an actor sees his death on a series as a bad thing. Right? Maybe they don't like me. You don't know why these things are happening. So it's really nice for them to clarify. What would have been nice for John was to sit down with us and say, here's, I know you're in this holding pattern, but I need to see this thing up before I croak, and I'm pretty close to it. So I need to see this thing up. So I'm going to I'm getting the money from the Daily Wire with their million of subscribers. I don't see how they are going to produce this on any level that it deserves to be produced at, because it is a big idea with has to have lots of capital behind it. Maybe they could do that. But he did not do this. We found out in the trades. I found out because it was texted to me by my agents and managers.
That was
you
the biggest disappointing part. Is objectivists, do we know how to treat each other? That's you don't treat each other like that you've been in business with for 2 years.
So for anybody out there who's in business with somebody, be straight up and honest with them all the time. Tell them what is going on. And if you're planning on making a move, don't hide it. Don't not say anything to them.
I can understand it's very appealing if the Daily Wire is coming at me and saying, I'm putting capital behind this. I'm putting money down on the table. We're going to do it. We have, XYZ. They don't have any creatives attached to it yet, which is going to be interesting to see what they can get in terms of A-listers. Because I know that a while back there was another effort and to get A-listers attached to it from the wrong people asking for it, and they got the door slammed in their face regularly.
Nobody in Hollywood is going to work for the Daily Wire.
Yeah, but I understand from John's perspective why he would take the deal. I just would have wanted the heads up prior, so that we could tell people about it and not be completely broadsided. But
I take that back. Nick Searcy would probably work for the Daily Wire, and he's a damn good actor. I love him a lot.
Nick Searcy's a great actor. He's a fantastic actor. The issue though, Mark, is, as you know, to get good A-listers, it's money. And that's a big part of the budget. That's one of the reasons why we had such a high budget for our series. I do want to correct. So I listened to the Daily Objective today with Rucka and James Valiant, two people who I love listening to them. They're awesome. James, if you're listening, you always have great, interesting things to say, and I want to be on a podcast with you. But James talked about, and these are some of the one of the super chats that people are at. Justin's asking about for $1.99. Will Daily Wire cut the sex scenes? And then there's other questions of how are they going to deal with all the sex and the atheism? Now, James thought that I think he was thinking that Daily Wire was turning this into movie, and so some of his commentary was about you just can't do what the book did in the movie form. I do want to correct, at least on behalf of the Daily Wire, because I want to be fair to them, that they are planning a series. They are planning it's going to be a limited series. So, and that's what Jennifer and I planned as well, was effectively a 3-season limited series where.
Hey, do you think Dallas? You think Dallas got that idea from us?
Might have. I mean, we talked to him about it, and but I mean, I don't want to start throwing legal stuff out there, because I think that John had always thought of it as a series as well. He always thought that that he wanted to do a series. So I want to be fair, but it'll be interesting to see if they, because Dallas has read our script, so it'll be interesting to see if anything from our script shows up there. But yeah, I just wanted to correct that. James, however, brought up a really, really great point in the Daily Objective, which I recommend everybody, if you haven't listened to it from today, go listen to it. He brought up a really great point about how Atlas Shrugged is it's a sexual and economic storytelling, and how is the Daily Wire going to handle that? Because if you don't, I mean, Ben Shapiro has even notably said that Dagny Taggart was like hopped from bed to bed. She's been with 3 men in her life, and that's hopping from bed to bed. How are they going to, and they were meaningful relationships, right?
They were good beds. They were good beds.
Say that?
Yeah.
But Ben is freaked out by sex. He's freaked out by his own desire for sex, and he feels like it's dark and he has to rein it in. So we see where that's coming from.
Yeah.
It's a very bad idea, but it hasn't stopped bad ideas from happening. And look, our culture and society and politics are filled with bad ideas, and they're at play in the world right now, and they have dominance, and people think they're good ideas, even though they're awful. So anyway, that's the story.
I almost on purpose now want to change parts of this. Like if we ever do it, I want to change parts of the story and have Cheryl have an abortion.
Well, look,
because, like, I mean, Rand is atheist. She's pro-choice. You know, how are they going to deal with that? Are they going to bring religion into it somehow? Are they going to bring and there was Ayn Rand did have in her original treatment of Atlas Shrugged, she had a religious character, Father Amadeus or something like that.
Yeah.
Who, but ultimately, and she brought him in as a person who would have been converted to atheism effectively over all these years, but she couldn't make it work. She said ultimately she just couldn't see it. She couldn't see how that would ever happen. And you know, how do you, I don't know how this conservative outlet is going to really represent Ayn Rand's ideas. Do you guys think that if Ayn Rand were approached by the Daily Wire that she would have ever sold the rights to?
No, and I don't think that she would have, and I haven't heard a conservative yet render any interpretation of Ayn Rand very well, or at least in a way that I think any objectivist who knows anything about objectivism would agree with. So it's pretty clear they don't know what they're talking about. Not as bad as the left who critiques her. They know less, but it's still pretty bad. So look, I think we should still attack them, not attack them, but I think we should still fight for that project until we know we can't anymore, right? Now, just because they have it now doesn't mean they're going to keep it. And I think we should still keep attacking it. We could still keep attacking it. Ben Shapiro called Ayn Rand's philosophy. Yes. Now, this is interesting. This is from Daniel, of course, who said Ben Shapiro called Ayn Rand's philosophy pretty garbage. So he agrees
pretty garbage,
with her.
like it's beautiful garbage, or it's pretty much garbage. Like that.
It's pretty much garbage.
Okay.
He thinks her economics is great, but he draws artificial distinctions between economics and ethics, and Rand doesn't. And so to call her philosophy garbage, the philosophy of reason, self-interest, a bad thing, is to also indict capitalism, which is based on those ethics. So you can't separate the two. I had an argument with a guy on social media. It's not an argument, but a discussion with an objectivist on social media, one of my partners in one of my endeavors, who thinks it's incrementally better to send it to the conservatives. They sort of know what it's about. And I say, no, they don't. No, they don't. How are they going to decouple the economics from the ethics? Because they hate the ethics. They might like the free market, but they hate the ethics. And that in Rand's work, it's inseparable. It's like separating shape from an object. You can't. Sorry. So it's a pipe dream to think that this is going to turn out good. I think it's going to be a freaking monster. It's going to be a Frankenstein's monster. With some bizarre moral compromises in there. I can't believe John let this happen. I can't believe Leonard let it happen. I'd like to hear Leonard's justification. Maybe the justification is just that, hey, they gave me $3 million or whatever the hell it is his asking fee is for that.
Yeah, and I don't know what the terms of the deal are. I don't know the extent that that Leonard was involved, to whatever extent he was involved. I mean, but it states very clearly in that article that this was a joint venture by Aglioloro and Peikoff and the estate of Ayn Rand. So I don't know. Allie for $2 says, I want to see y'all's version. I support y'all. Thank you, Allie. And I thank you, Mark, also for the like we should still keep fighting on this. And because what we have is good and it's right. And it's something that actually can change hearts and minds. And we didn't, above all, we write to entertain. And Jennifer and I are going to continue to write to entertain and we've got lots of other great projects that are in the works. And, so this is not the end. It's not a big doomsday thing. Interesting. Cyrano D'Anconia said, I think this is directed to you, Mark. Do you know, in April 7th, Timcast, Craven. Who's Craven? Do you know who this is, Mark?
Craven?
Yeah,
I know
Craven.
Timcast.
Oh, okay. So Craven, so whoever I guess is on Timcast, Craven calls Rand a psychopath at the 141 mark.
Yeah, that's, I mean, that's
is he
just a
somebody with the Daily Wire, I guess?
I don't know who that
Oh,
is.
yes, that's right. Claven. Yeah, I think he
Okay,
is
Craven.
associated with. Yeah, I mean, that's the typical critique that you get from these morons. And they are now in control of the project. People who think she's a sociopath are going to be making this thing.
Yeah.
Insane.
It is absolutely insane.
It's the
John.
upside down world. It's the upside down world.
John, I'm holding John's neck right now, and I'm slapping him across the top of the head.
Mm.
I'm making a pledge now. I'm going to write him a letter. It won't be as scathing as the letter I sent Dallas, but it's going to be very hard. I'll talk about it with you ladies beforehand. I'll read it to you and get your approval, so I don't say anything that bothers you or makes you feel uncomfortable. But I am going to light a fire under his New Jersey-born balls that will at least make him a little bit uncomfortable. And I know I'm not supposed to say that on the air here. I used bad words.
Well, that's why we love you.
Getting Mark raw right now.
Because I hate traitors. I hate disloyalty. This guy goes on and on and on about business integrity. Where's your fucking integrity talking to us? So I'm going to make him understand that. And I don't give a fuck how he, excuse me, pardon my French. I don't give ear muffs for anybody who's hating my language. I don't care what he thinks about himself. He's going to learn that he acted like a jackass by not informing people who put their trust in him. He's going to know this.
We definitely would have liked to have heard about it first. And to understand.
Who wouldn't? We got broken up. We got broken up with over text. Worse. No, it's worse. It's like you think your boyfriend or your girlfriend is, out at a convention. Where are they? In the Bahamas with somebody else. And there's nude photographs of them on the beach. That's what John did.
Oh, I've been there. Yeah, no, I haven't been the nude photographs on the beach, but yeah, I've been in that situation.
Yeah, it's no fun. It's no fun. Well, it's actually fun for me because I'm going to enjoy what I'm going to say to him because I like justice. I like attempting to get justice. Anyway,
haven't
folks,
you been in contact with Dallas though too? Did
no.
Dallas?
Yo, Dallas wanted me to be a part of the Gina Carano movie that they were doing over there.
Okay.
But he would have asked me to give up my SAG membership, which means I would have had to go on financial core. I don't know if any of that means I lose all the benefits that I've paid into for 30 years, and I didn't want to take that chance. And I didn't know what the part was that they wanted to give me. And I'm not sure, and I wasn't sure that I wanted to be associated with them anyway. So there were a billion reasons why I said no.
Makes me wonder if he's going to be asking actors to give up their SAG membership for this project.
But he did say that anybody who works at the Daily Wire, they are not going SAG. So if Nick Searcy does decide to go over there, more power to him. Love the guy. He's a really cool dude. He's going to have to go financial core, and maybe he can do that. Maybe that doesn't bother him.
Well, the benevolent part of me wants to wish the Daily Wire the best of luck.
No. So
an interesting thing I will say. So there was an interesting thing that James and Rucka brought up this morning, which is that if they do produce something that those million conservative viewers watch and that they like, it could cause them to read Atlas Shrugged and read Ayn Rand and potentially could cause them to abandon the Daily Wire. So in that sense, I'm going to wish them luck in producing something that will cause all of their subscriber base to run.
That's very optimistic, but highly doubtful. And I do not wish them luck. I wish them all the horror in the world. I hope everything falls apart in their face so that we can pick this up and do it the way it needs to be done. So I have no shame in saying that either. Partly because of the way that we found this remotely instead of being told by John. He comes off as a New Jersey tough guy, right? The New Jersey tough guy was nowhere to be found when he had to be tough and talk to people about what his intentions were. So I want to see the New Jersey tough guy again. Hey, maybe I'll send a couple of New Jersey mob guys over to my place to do a hit.
Oh my God. Yes, I will say, so the way that I found out yesterday was Mark texting us. I happened to be sort of in the middle of a doctor's appointment and I didn't have my glasses on, and it came up on my Apple Watch, and Mark sent us a link to the article, which doesn't show up on my Apple Watch. He just says, maybe we should talk about this in our pre-show call tonight for All Mankind. And so I thought he was sending a article about For All Mankind that would be relevant. And it's because I didn't have my glasses, I asked my doc, I'm like, can you read what this says? And she wrote, oh, maybe we should talk about this. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. And then when I was done with the appointment and I actually clicked on the article and I was like, holy, I gotta go. So yeah.
Well, all right, guys.
Not a good way to find out, but yeah.
I think we've talked about this enough. Unless there's any questions, I think we can just move on and move on with our lives, move onward and upward, and keep trying to push this project. Even if the Daily Wire seems to have it, I think we should still pursue it until we can't anymore. We'll take no for we won't take no for an answer until they're kicking us out the door and locking us up in a cell.
Yeah, what we have is still awesome, and I do want to be an optimist, and I want to believe that we will be able to get this done. May not be in the immediate time frame that we wanted, but we'll get it done. But in the meantime, we got some other cool shit we're going to be doing. So
that's right. I think
and we're going to still do TV talk.
I think Sutherland's opened up a pretty interesting forum for us to work creatively. Yeah. So guys, we're gonna draw a conclusion to the festivities today. Thanks for joining us. And remember, next time we get together, which is going to be when?
I believe we talked about December 9th.
Looking like December 9th, because I have to travel next week and stuff, and I'm working on another thing. December 9th. That gives you a lot of time to watch Enola Holmes and Enola Holmes 2. They're awesome. It'll be a piece of soul candy for you. You're going to enjoy it. You're going to come out of the experience feeling better. And then we could talk about all of that stuff in a couple of weeks. In the dead of winter, just as it's snowing everywhere around us, it'll warm the cockles of our heart to talk about these.
You guys will be in the snow. I won't be in the snow. But
yes, indeed.
Jennifer's moving to Colorado. That's the news. We didn't tell that news last time, but Jennifer will be in Colorado at that time.
Good luck.
I am leaving California. Bye-bye, California.
Good luck. Yeah. I wish I was leaving permanently, but sadly I'm not. All right, folks. So that's been this crazy long episode of TV Talk. I hope you enjoyed the talk about the TV and the craziness around Atlas Shrugged. If you have any more questions, definitely talk to us on social media. We're more than open to discussing this further. Until then, this is Mark Pellegrino, Jennifer Bouani, and Jack Schumann saying adieu.
Au revoir.